No. Oh, that's part of the agenda. That's, no, I think that's actually part of the agenda. Right? I mean, I think that's been part of our agenda. I just copy. I mean, in full disclosure, I copy the agenda from one meeting to the next and just change stuff. But that part never changes. No, 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 stop, stop. No technical difficulties. Not allowed. Not allowed. 10 seconds. Oh, yeah. We have a hand raised. Yes. Do you mean to have your hand raised? I mean, it's fine. Okie dokie. All right,
Let's
Yoav, you're on.
test of the raise hand functionality.
All right, do you want to do the chair slides?
I think I already am.
Yes.
Okay, now time to start. Okay, welcome everybody to the ACME session at the IETF 117. As I understand it, it's 5:30 p.m. Where you are. It's 3:30 in the morning here. So, okay, so this is the notewell in really hard eye chart mode. Those of us who are looking at it on the computer screen can actually read it. The rest of you know what's in it. If you don't, please read it and the RFCs it points to. Next, we have our agenda. So we're going to start with the notewell. Yay, already done. And then the agenda bashing and technical issues, if there are any. So the first technical issue, can you all hear me? Yes, no?
No, I think we're good. I think we're good.
Okay, good. Right. So if the first thing we'll do is a quick document status. Then we have presentations of working group documents such as DNS account challenge, ARI, and ACME Onion. And we'll have one presentation of something that is not, at least not yet, a working group document, the ACME Auto Discovery. Well, this will be followed by any other business. Okay, any agenda bashing? No? Okay, so let's proceed with document status. So ACME Onion was adopted since last IETF, and the first version was submitted on June 22nd, and we have a presentation today, so let's not go too deep into that. And DNS account challenge, also presentation today, and this looks like a 0.0 draft, but it actually isn't. It's just been renamed from the old name that was ACME DNS account 01, which was always confusing to people in the as a draft name. And we have ACME client was updated with version 06. No presentation today. ARI, not updated, and we have a presentation. ACME integrations. Okay, this had versions 14 to 17 submitted since IETF 116. We changed the intended status from informational to proposed standard, and it has been approved. It's now in the RFC editor's queue. Remember that last time we said that we hadn't had an RFC published in a while, and this was going to change because we have a bunch of stuff in the RFC editors queue. Almost. Subdomains is now in auth 48 for roughly the last 240 hours. 10 days. ACME authority token TN-auth list. It was approved before IETF116 and it's still in the RFC editors queue. ACME authority token was approved before IETF116 and still in the RFC editors queue. And DTN node ID validation extension. Publication was requested, but it's been stuck since October. So as far as I can see, no real progress in there.
So I think what we're going to do there is try and talk to Brian Sipsos and find out what the plan is for this. Some of the IDs that he had referenced are now either in working group last call or are expired. So we need to contact him and see what the plan is. So we're going to do that this week. They meet on Wednesday.
Okay, good.
This is Brian. I am in
So
the
still
room.
no RFC
And
published
he's,
since.
and he's in the room.
Yeah.
Hold on, Yoff, he's
Oh.
in the room. So,
Okay.
So like you said, the logjam has broken a little bit.
yay.
The other documents in last call,
Mhm.
it's going to go through last call, and then hopefully it'll be able to hit the IESG review at the same time as this
Okay.
document.
So let's you and me and Roman talk after this, and we'll figure out where we're going to go with the draft that's here. Yeah.
Okay, so still no RFC published since September 21, and hopefully this will change by IETF 118. I mean, yeah, we're not 48. Okay. Next thing is presentations, and the first presentation is DNS account. Amir, I think.
Hello.
So I'm not sure if he's in. I think he's online.
Hi.
Oh, okay.
There he is.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So yeah, DNS account challenge. The name of the document, we changed it because DNS account 01 was confusing. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right. A quick background on anyone who doesn't know what this is, what problem it's trying to solve. It's a very niche problem, but at least I think it's going to be a pretty useful problem to solve. So when I'm getting certificates, I'm basically using DNS01 most of the time. I know HTTP01 is probably a lot more popular, but DNS01 is kind of what I always use, and it's awesome. But it has some limitations. The limitations really come down to it's hard to do domain validation delegation. You can use CNAMEs, but you can only use CNAMEs once, and that creates a problem for adoption in larger domains that already have kind of an established DNS system. This is especially problematic if you kind of want to have a somewhat of a decentralized system with DNS, with your domain validation. Say you're having your DNS on Cloudflare and you want to have some servers on AWS and some servers on Azure and some servers on GCP. You kind of want to make sure with a better design would be to be able to essentially manage your certificates on each of those platforms if you want to use DNS01. But DNS01, again, with the CNAME limitations, you end up having to move credentials around to basically be able to change some other DNS server somewhere to get essentially all of that set up for you. So what this RFC proposes is using the KID value, the ACME account ID value, to create a blob that is well known to both the client and the server, and essentially namespace where you're looking up the DNS text record challenge. So instead of it being _acme-challenge dot the domain, it becomes _acme-challenge _ a blob dot the domain. This allows you to have multiple CNAMEs, and that helps with the adoption with larger domains that are already established. It helps with resilience of the systems. You're not really reliant on this one specific area to update your DNS. It's also, I'm going to get into the beyond HTTPS part, but it's also not intended to replace DNS01. And beyond HTTPS is, ACME is not just for domain validation for domain validated certs. It's not just for, HTTPS. You can imagine this being something you want to do to separate out your system that maintains, for example, SMIME certificates with HTTPS certificates. So that's kind of what this RFC is going to try to solve. Next slide, please. So there were 3 updates, one being the name, and then the 2 other ones are kind of pertaining to errors and something a little bit more specific about the KID values. So one awesome thing about DNS-01 is it's so easy to support people who have problems adopting it. I kind of frequent the Let's Encrypt community forums, and it's kind of easy to just say, hey, I'm having a problem with this. This is the error I got. Can someone help me figure out what's going on? I can go, go do a DNS lookup, find out what they've set up on their text record, and help them out. This gets significantly harder with DNS account 01 because I don't have the account URI that they use, essentially, that they have with the lookup. So the RFC now specifies that the server should return. We don't say where, but should return in the error, somewhere in the error, what was the account URI used to construct this, to construct the lookup text records. This is, I'm specifically not saying where it should be, mainly because I don't want clients to end up building specific support to go look up that error and go figure out where they should put the text records. And the other thing is, this is something we actually ran into, is the KID value. It's easy on the server side to, and by us, I mean Google Trust Services, it's easy to kind of mess up and not make sure that the KID values are stable. For example, if you have an extra piece on the host name, if you have query parameters, you kind of don't want to have that be used in the calculation. So it just specifies to the implementers on the server side that, hey, do your best to make sure that's stable, because if it's not, you're going to cause a mismatch between what the client is assuming and what the server is assuming. So that's the main changes that the RFC has seen. So yeah, next slide. So this is some time for any questions and any feedback to for basically where we should go from this. Are there any concerns you have? And what else we can change in this, etc.
Brian?
Hi, Brian Dixon here. I'm in the DNS op working group. We have a draft there that's under discussion about validation, for doing DNS validation, basically exactly the same as what you're discussing here. Might be good to connect up with the folks who have been developing that draft and seeing about where it fits, or maybe just have it be across different working groups.
Awesome. Could you let me know what that draft is, either now or later as well?
Sure. I'll drop the link in on this chat channel.
Awesome,
And there's
thank you.
also a separate thing which I was going to suggest might be also worth discussing, is a thing called Domain Connect, which is designed to facilitate service operators and DNS providers for setting up records in DNS on behalf of users, or, well, registrants. The registrant authorizes that by authenticating against their DNS provider, and that's basically, it's a standardized API and uses templates, and it's fairly widely used within a smallish group of service providers and DNS providers, but those are fairly major ones, including, I believe, Google, Cloudflare, GoDaddy. But we also probably want to talk about that because it helps with the whole process of filling in the data. It does not require the registrant, i.e. whoever owns the zone, to actually fill in all those values.
Thank you.
Hey. Hello. Hey. Hi, I'm Shivan Sahib. I'm one of the co-authors of the draft that Brian Dixon just mentioned. And the idea with the draft was to kind of generalize the what ACME recommends around domain control validation, because on the internet, like it's kind of a free for all right now. So I guess one question I had was, in this draft, you propose adding the account or identifier to the ACME challenge label itself. Is there a reason you don't want to do it just adding a new label to the left of it? Because it just seems like that would make the zone management easier and also allow you to delegate that subtree, just to a different person or organization. And that's kind of what we've been recommending in our draft. So it'll be great if, I guess we're all aligned. But just like genuinely curious why you wanted to do it that way.
Yeah. So the main limitations that we're kind of operating within is also the baseline requirements of the CAP form, the CAM browsers CAP form. The limitations there's very specific language on how you can do domain validation. And if it's, if the dot is there, then you're technically validating that part of the domain, not the actual part of the domain you're trying to validate. You're effectively validating a subdomain. And the design of this was kind of designed of like, hey, we kind of want to start using this. And right now, this is usable. Effectively, any CA would be able to use this. And it would be, from our understanding, it would be compliant from the CAP form perspective. So it's kind of designing with that limitation in mind. And there's some risks to changing how that language is written. There's risks of that being potentially interpreted in such a way of being able to do domain validation on something that you're not actually intending to validate. You can imagine the risks of, hey, I don't know, github.io actually. I give people, each person gets their own kind of space. You don't get DNS control there, but you can kind of imagine a service like that gives you a subdomain. You might end up being able to, potentially with a bad implementation, end up being able to verify the main domain rather than the subdomain. So there's a lot of uphill battle, essentially, uphill work to kind of get that done, to get that language change in the CAP form, even if we intend to go that direction. So that's really the reason of using the underline blob.
Is that publicly available documentation?
Yep, I will put a link in the chat, but it's the CAM browsers forum. Yep.
Okay. So you're saying like if we had like xyz.acme challenge or underscore acme challenge, like that wouldn't work right now?
xyz.acme challenge, no, that would not work either, because underline acme challenge is like it's supposed to be on like the leftmost part of this. Sorry, I thought you meant on the right part of it, but yeah, the leftmost part has to start with like underline acme dash challenge as well. So that's the other part of the limitation.
Okay, if you have a pointer, that'd be really great to see.
Yep.
Tim Hullaby, DigiCert. On the CA browser forum issue, I would prefer to see this done the right way, especially since we're kind of in a greenfield situation here. And if we want to add an additional label to the left with a dot, I actually kind of like that better. I'd have to, I can pull the CA browser forum and see how people think there, but that's not a big problem. So if there, the CA browser forum can change the baseline requirements in 2 weeks if it has to. And there's several of us in this room that are fairly familiar with doing that. So I would love to work together with both the DNS op guys and you guys and figure out what the right thing is to do. And then if we have to modify the baseline requirements, I'll write the ballot. I don't care. So let's just do the right thing.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And next up is ARI.
So Samantha should be remote as well.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Awesome. Hopefully everybody can hear me well.
Yes.
Excellent. So today I'm presenting for ARI, which is Acme Renewal Info. So for those who don't know, Acme allows issuing CAs to suggest a period during which clients should renew their certificates. This allows CAs to better respond to exceptional circumstances. For example, a CA could suggest that clients renew prior to a mass revocation event, or to otherwise mitigate the impact of a large renewal spike. Can we move to the next slide, please? Awesome. So as far as updates, there's been no changes to the draft specification. ARI has been fully implemented and deployed by Let's Encrypt and Google Trust Services, and is currently under evaluation by Certainly. And go ahead and move to excellent. All right, and since our last update, there's been a good deal of client adoption. Exemplar ACME, which we've used for many years in our integration test suite, has since adopted ARI. Sorry, our test suite at Let's Encrypt. Go Acme Lego has merged a contribution written by myself and advertises support for ARI as a feature in their documentation. Phil, one of my peers on the development team, has been evaluating several popular Bash clients for contribution. And of course, we continue to evaluate additional clients for contribution. Excellent. Can we go to the next slide, please? As far as adoption goes, we only have data going back to mid-May. However, as you can see on the graph, during that time alone, we've seen an order of magnitude increase in weekly ARI endpoint usage. We don't have a method for calculating a conversion rate for renewals quite yet, but I believe that some of the open questions under consideration should give us a clear path towards achieving that. Next slide, please. All right, and at this time, we have 3 open questions. First, we've received feedback that the OCSP cert ID is challenging to construct. An alternative under consideration is a base64 URL of the authority key identifier concatenated with the serial, and all of that being base64 URL encoded. This uniquely identifies the certificate while also being easy to construct, but unlike OCSP cert ID, it's not based on an existing battle-tested format. So there are some trade-offs there, and that's still under consideration. Second, there are 2 proposals to reduce request volume. For some clients that are renewing for thousands of certificates at once, there's been some talk of being able to have some type of a batch endpoint. One is a get endpoint, which accepts a batch of unique certificate IDs, again, that OCSP cert ID, and returns renewal info for each. Another is an authenticated post as get endpoint, which would be able to return the renewal info for every active certificate registered to that account, probably in batches of about 100. And lastly, we have 2 proposals to simplify client logic. Single timestamp instead of a window of time. Some of the feedback that we received from client authors was that having to determine a window, or sorry, an exact renewal time based on the 2 timestamps could be just simplified by having a single timestamp. A mechanism, and secondly, a mechanism that would allow clients to bypass rate limits during the renewal window. This reduces the likelihood of needing to retry during the window and functions as an incentive to adoption. And that's about it. Moving on to questions.
Okay, that was easy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so next up is Onion. Acme for Onions.
I don't know if you can give me control of the slides on my phone. I've seen other people do that. Yeah, so you have to request it. I have the person app as well. Is that the right button?
So what he's using is a combined slide deck, which is like the chair slides with all of the slides. No, it's going to be old school. I'm sorry. We're old. It's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, there's a pink square here. You have to stand on the pink square. Bring the mic back. The mic back.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a
There
thing.
we go.
We've had practice.
Okay, cool. Right. Acme for Onions. Next slide, please. So since the last IETF, the draft has been adopted. Yay. I've made a reference CA and client implementation. The reference CA implementation is available for anyone to use, assuming my server hasn't died in the meantime. It's been reliable so far, so that's good. The client implementation is a plugin for certbot. Other clients I don't know enough about to make an implementation for, so that's someone else's job. And there's also a Tor specification proposal to add the CAA part of this draft into the Tor hidden services specification. Next slide, please. So why would we even want to have X509 certs for Tor hidden services? Aren't they already secure by nature of being Tor hidden services? Mostly it's to do with clients which aren't aware of what Tor is. Like you should, if you have a SOX proxy that talks to Tor, you should just be able to open something in Chrome and it has a HTTPS cert, so Chrome knows it's secure without even considering the fact that it is Tor. There are also some policy reasons why you might need a HTTPS cert. PCI DSS, if you want to take card payments over Tor, just requires that you have HTTPS. There's no way around that. And just general security in depth to have multiple layers of consideration where security would happen. Next slide, please. So the goal of this draft is to define extensions to ACME to automate the issuance of X509 certificates for Tor hidden services in line with accepted methods in the CA browser form baseline requirement. An explicit non-goal is to define things which would not be compatible with the existing baseline requirements. If someone can come up with a method and get it approved by the CA browser forum, then I would be interested in hearing. But I think there's enough in the baseline requirements to make a workable spec here. Next slide, please. So the current state of things is DigiCert issues certificate, extended validation only, so they're difficult to automate. And the Greek Research Universities Association also do domain validation certs, but have absolutely no automation whatsoever for this. So there's clearly space to improve here. Next slide, please. So in the CA browser from BR Appendix B, there are these methods which can be used to validate a Tor hidden service. The last three can be used inside ACME. The first two kind of already exist in ACME. The last one is mostly what this draft is focused on defining how to use. Next slide, please. So I've chosen to use the DNS identifier type and not define a new identifier type such as onion for this, because in the case of the HTTP1 and TLS ALPN1 validation methods, the client can just be oblivious to the fact that it's getting a certificate for a Tor hidden service. Like if you have certbot running on a server with Nginx and the Tor proxy, certbot doesn't need to know that the Tor proxy exists. You just tell it, get a certificate for this domain, and then it does a HTTP 01 validation as it normally would with Nginx on any other HTTP website, and it can just work. Next slide, please. So there's also the new Onion CSR 01 validation method, which implements the last method from the baseline requirements Appendix B, where the clients prove control over a hidden service domain by signing a certificate signing request with the private key of the Onion domain. And because the Onion domain itself is the public key, signing the CSR with the private key proves control over that domain. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the Tor hidden service descriptor before I get on to CAA, so you can understand how this works. So it's composed of 3 layers. There's the outer layer, which is available to all hidden service directories. This explicitly contains no information about the hidden service and is fetched with the service's blinded public key. So the Tor hidden service directories know nothing about this. Then you use the actual public key to decrypt the first layer, which contains yes, next slide. Which actually contains information about which clients are allowed to connect. So that's the auth client thing. You can do mutual authentication in Tor hidden service, which will also be relevant later. And then using that auth client and the service's public key, you can then actually get the second layer encrypted data. Next slide, please. Which actually contains the information you need to connect to the hidden service. Right, next slide, please. So yes, there's client authentication here, which allows hidden services to restrict which clients can connect using client authentication. In this draft, I've defined a new auth key field to allow hidden services operators to allow CA's Tor client to read their hidden service descriptions to issue certificates. So a hidden service might not want to make itself available to the entire network, but still wants to make itself available to the CA so that a certificate can be issued for it. This auth key field in the draft allows the CA to advertise to the client its public key so that the client can add the CA's public key to its hidden service descriptor to allow the CA to connect to it and issue a certificate. Next slide, please. Then there's the consideration of CAA records, which of course can't exist in the standard way for Onion domains because they're not in the DNS. Instead, because the hidden service script is just a text format, we can add a new CAA record to this, encoded in the same way as a DNS zone file would encode it, and then the same, it's used in the same way as the CAA record in DNS would be, except it's just encoded in a slightly different way and fetched in a slightly different way because the DNS isn't involved. Next slide, please. There's because of the auth key system and the client authentication, there is also the possibility that there are CAA records which a CA can't see. So in the first layer hidden encrypted data, there's also a CAA critical flag, which is just a signal to the CA that there are CAA records within the second layer descriptor, and you should not continue with issuance until you've managed to decrypt the second layer descriptor and actually pass these CAA records. Otherwise, a CA which doesn't have permission to connect to that hidden service would end up not knowing that there were CAA records at all, and this might cause a misissuance. Next slide, please. So that's everything. I think the next steps are probably implement this in CertBot, given that's the CA software that most CAs seem to be using these days, and also just gather more feedback from people about this and try and, I've made my implementation. I want other people to try and implement this and tell me what I've got wrong. Any questions?
Tim?
Yeah, Tim Halbeck again. HTTP 01 over Onion is actually something I've never thought about before. And I'm a little bit worried that it might have some security properties that the fact that you're going through all these, like, can a malicious exit node, for example, say, yes, your validation succeeded when it wouldn't otherwise, right? And I can get a certificate with that shouldn't actually validate. Whether that's a problem or not, I'm trying to think through.
Malicious exit nodes don't exist in hidden services because the connection never exits the Tor network.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Yeah, no, it's just I hadn't thought about it before, and we probably should think through a little bit whether the existing validation methods have any unexpected properties when you're using them across Onion, because they really weren't designed to be used that way. And
yeah,
I'm not saying it's bad, but
my assumption was the baseline requirements allow this, therefore there should be a standard which says how you do it.
Well, yeah, or that you shouldn't do it if it turns out to be a bad idea. Yeah, no, so 100% in agreement. This is worth thinking about.
I do believe that HTTP 01 over hidden services would be fine. There is a note in the security considerations that Tor should not be used for non-hidden services because of exactly what you said.
Yeah, okay, good. No, I'm glad you thought about yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's worth a little bit more thinking about because Tor is, the Appendix B version got written because Tor is a little bit special in lots of different ways. Yeah, so thank you.
Daniel Gilmore. Sorry, I didn't get in the queue. I was just
taking
I was
notes.
going to say.
I know, terrible. I waited. There was no one else. I'm wondering what kind of tooling you have set up to, if a CA wanted to deploy this, do you have tooling that you could use to verify that they don't make mistakes, like ignoring the CAA critical flag?
No, that doesn't exist yet. I have some test hidden services set up which implement the spec correctly. But I could compile versions of Tor which purposefully publish slightly broken hidden service descriptors to be able to test CAs against this. That's not something I thought of, but all I was thinking of at the time was...
Right, you want to make it work.
I want to make it work,
but
you want to make it break.
Well,
yes.
I'm saying that if...
No, he wants to make sure it doesn't break.
Right.
But
so,
to do that, you have to test it broken.
right. And so it seems like if I was a CA, which I'm not,
Yeah.
but if I was operating a CA, I would want, and I was considering rolling this out, I would want to roll it out and with some reliable test suite that would say, you got it right, you didn't get it wrong, you didn't get it wrong. So it might be
Yeah.
worth having something like that set up.
That's something that could be relatively easy done, I think.
Ooh, well, might be tricky, right? So you have to get it wrong, and
Yeah.
like it's hard to find all of the cases, right?
Well, we can
You
should
you
be
do
able
the
to
best-
find some
you do the best
cases
you
which,
can.
yeah,
You do the best you can.
it should be
right?
possible to think of a
Yeah.
few cases which should be handled correctly.
Yeah,
And try
yeah,
those.
yeah, exactly. Say
Sorry?
that louder.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Right, exactly. I mean, this is tricky, right?
Yes. This is why I want more people to look at my documents and tell me
I
what I've
agree.
done wrong. Right. Well, thank you all.
Certainly, thank you.
Thank you, which leaves us with one last thing, a new, a new idea. It's called Acme Auto Discovery. There has been little discussion on the list, and now we're getting a presentation. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Olaf. There's in fact been a lot of discussion on the list. Thank you.
In Acme terms, yes.
Is that a dig at something?
Our own working group.
Hopefully, what I thought that was a dig at. Hopefully, this is less contentious than my usual post-quantum fare.
Well, this is not post-quantum, so it will be less contentious, yes.
All right, let's go.
Sorry, I'm sorry. My apologies.
My role at IETF seems to be catching rotten tomatoes. Let's see how many I can get here. All right, next. Who's controlling slides?
No, Yoav's got control.
Okay. So about half the discussion on the mailing list was sort of the form, hey, this might apply to some other use case. And if so, there's problems with it. So I want to start off the very beginning stating what problem we're trying to solve. And if you try to apply this to a different problem and find issues with it, that's the definition of scope creep. So the problem we are trying to solve is public domains hosted on public cloud providers trying to get certs from public CAs, specifically where the domain owner, Joe admin here, has a preferred CA. So Joe might work for some massive corporation that manages hundreds or thousands of certs and likes them to be managed through a single management interface. And the fact that he has like 3 certs over on some other CA is super annoying. So Joe would like to be able to specify which CA Cloud Inc. should request certs from on his behalf. Next. So I'm going to pick on a few cloud providers here. DigitalOcean, if you want to get a cert from them and you want to use Acme, then you get to use Let's Encrypt. If you don't want to get your certs from Let's Encrypt, you can upload a PEM file. Next. Let's pick on someone else. Fastly, you can do Acme to Let's Encrypt or Global Sign. All right, that is twice as much options. If you don't like those, PEM file. Next. We tested a few more, all basically the same story. Support Acme, but to the cloud provider's choice of Acme server, not the subscriber's choice of Acme server. Next. This is why we can't have nice things. And by nice things, I mean 90-day certs. If you are the default CA or default ACME server for all of these environments, then yeah, the world looks 100% automated. Why can't we have 90 or even 30-day certs? If you are not the preferred ACME provider of all these environments, then we are still heavily relying on humans uploading PEM files, which is really a reason that we can't go to 90-day certs. So like, I am pitching this as a prerequisite problem to moving to shorter lifetime certs. Also, I'm somewhat required to put in here, there's a bit of an antitrust problem buried in here somewhere, that there tends to be a single default CA for all these environments. The default becomes the norm. All the normal antitrust stuff lacks issuer diversity, single points of failure, etc. I'm also going to promote here right up to the problem statement. One side effect of this draft is that we provide a way to prioritize ACME servers to communicate to the ACME client. Here's 3 ACME servers I'd like you to use on my behalf, and here's a prioritized list, either 1, 2, 3 or 1, 1, 2, in which case here's 2 I want load balanced, and if those both fail, try another one. So that's a nice side effect of this, so I'll put it here as a problem statement. So the question is, how do we automate discovery of the domain owner's preferred CA? The answer is we already have a mechanism that is 98% of the way there. Next. Dun, 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 dun. CAA. Next. So here's stuff that already exists. This is all mechanisms that are already there in the world. Joe Admin is configuring his domain on Cloud Inc. He also has control of the DNS record for his domain. There is an ACME bot running inside Cloud Inc. It has a default CA or default ACME server that it wants to reach out to. We ought to be able to make these things link up and have that ACME bot go arrow down rather than arrow up. Next. So the question is, how do we add these dotted lines? And this largely comes down to changing ACME client behavior. There's not actually very much that we need to define that's new to make this work, other than changing some client logic to actually go look at the CAA record and then try and fetch it. There's a little bit of subtlety in that those CAA labels are FQDNs, but currently there's no strict requirement that they be reachable FQDNs. So we are a little bit overloading the logic here to say not only is ca.cacorp.com a unique label, but also it had better be a reachable domain, so that, yeah, there's some overloading of CAA logic here, but let's, next. So here's the details of our draft. Here's the proposed happy path workflow. We are defining a few new things. So we're defining a few DNS CAA extensions or parameters. So discovery and priority would sit underneath issue or issue wild or issue mail. They'd be subparameters of those. Neither of them are particularly core to the proposal, but while we're at it, we might as well. So discovery true false is if the CA label is not an ACME server. You know that it is not an ACME server. You do not want ACME clients to try it. Discovery false. Priority is that ranked list, so you can communicate to the ACME client which order you want it to try ACME servers. We do need some sort of alias or redirect mechanism because the FQDN may not actually be an ACME server, so you need a way to shunt the client over to the right place. Either you mirror the ACME directory object there, or you put a 302 there to send the client to the right place. In the draft, we're proposing to register a .wellknown URI. There's been some discussion on Lisp. Richard Barnes suggested instead just stick the whole ACME URL into another extension. I was chatting with Philip Hollenbaker yesterday, who suggested that maybe a DNS SRV record at the CA might be a better way to manage that. So I think that .wellknown maybe is up for debate. You need some sort of redirect mechanism. Probably more debate on that one's needed. The bulk of the draft is suggested ACME client behavior. Just how do you actually read all these things and do the right thing based on them? There is some subtlety in priority and issue. If you see an issue and an issue mail, so there is some logic that needs to be specified. And then there's a tricky point regarding account binding. So typically, as I understand it today, these cloud providers have one ACME account that they use for all of their subscribers. And there's a number of reasons here why we need to move the account binding from the cloud provider to the subscriber, from Cloud Inc. to Joe Admin. One is if you're trying to get certs from a commercial CA, we need to know who to bill for it. If you've done EV or OV validation against a CA, we need to obviously link that up so we can give you your EV cert. There's also the issue of terms of service. The cloud providers, for good reason, don't want to be blindly accepting TOSs of random arbitrary Acme servers on the internet. So we need to make it very clear that it is Joe admin who's agreeing to the TOS, not Cloud Inc. So for all those reasons, we need to be able to bind the account of Joe, not the account of Cloud Inc. We do not want to have subscribers provide their Acme account binding key to the hosting provider. I think there's good privacy reasons for doing that. And I think also that requires all the hosting providers to change their UIs, which is the problem we're trying to avoid in the first place. So we're proposing to use the internal account binding either by DV or by email as a way to figure out who you are and get authorization to issue that cert on that account. So that's it. These are all sort of relatively minor things. The bulk of it is really just client logic. Next. We do have one piece of running code, thanks to Q, whose name I have misspelled. Much apologies. How long did it take you to write this? Not very, right? Hour and a half to implement this? Relatively few problems? Yep. Relatively few problems. Great. Thank you. Next. That's it. Is this useful? Can we have it?
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Only one on the queue. Yeah, Rich Saul's Akamai. Oops.
That's an interesting slip.
I was the first chair of the working
were the
group, so I can say that. Yeah, I think this is really. I teach them. So I think this is really useful and interesting, and we should adopt it. I also think another argument in favor is it lessens the chance of a single point of failure if the world's biggest free CA melts down, because that's something we're concerned about too.
And I'll add to that, one thing I didn't put on the sides, but I probably should have, is this will ramp up adoption of CAA. So right now, CAA is a way to break your own site, but it doesn't actually, help automation. Whereas now we're actually using CAA to increase automation, which should actually get people to use CAA
Yeah,
more.
we don't use CA. This might push it over the line.
Amir, you put yourself in the queue there, Bubba.
Let me just
Okay, go ahead.
really quick sentence. We actually support this. We think this is a good idea. So
Okay. Amir.
Yeah, I had the video I think just stopped. Okay, yeah, whatever. I had a question on basically, like, I think the premise that you started this with, I think this is really useful, but at the same time, I think like the reason I think a lot of those providers aren't giving you more than Let's Encrypt as an option, I think it's just really because there's not a lot of other options right now in the anonymous Acme CA world that you can kind of just go use a CA without somehow getting an external account binding token beforehand. So I think that was part of it. I like essentially the problem statement, I think, is like just kind of taking a not like I didn't see that kind of being discussed there. Does this potentially get more CAs to go to the anonymous routes like Let's Encrypt has? And the other question I had was how
No, because
this might be written in
CAs
the article. How is failure going to be handled in this situation? If the CAA says use example Acme CA, and that's just not available, what is the cloud provider going to do in that situation?
Right. Okay. Two questions there. I'll answer them in order. So no, this is not trying to get more CAs to do anonymous issuance. We are recommending the internal account binding method by DV or email. So we are providing a way to link this up to accounts. The second question was, if I can paraphrase it a bit, what if a CA has multiple Acme servers or an Acme server fails? Can you do that question again?
Says use example Acme server, and that's just not available at the time. Does the domain not get a, like in this case, like, the auto discovery says this, but it's not really limiting it to example Acme server. It's just saying, I prefer example Acme server.
Right. So CAA, you can put multiple CAs in your CAA record, and we're providing a priority parameters. So you can rank them. Here's my 4 CAs that I'm authorizing this domain to get certs from, and here's the order in which I'd like you to try them. If the first one fails, move on to the second one. Or potentially, if you already have a cert from the first one and I'd like you to have a backup cert, go on to the second one. One thing that I think has been brought up on list, I'm not sure if this is what you're raising or not, but it has been brought up, is what if a CA operates multiple ACME servers? And our .well-known doesn't currently handle that, but I think if we move to a SRV DNS record, we might be able to do that. We need to consider that.
So can I, before Daniel goes, how common is it for somebody to use a backup ACME server if the primary one is down? Like, is that a thing? It does? Like, things are interchangeable like that? Like you could, if this is down over here, you can go over there?
I've got my infrastructure set up to go to Google Trust Services and Max encrypted Google Trust Services for some weird reason fails to issue.
Until you have accounts on both of them? And okay.
It's the same protocol. I can just ask either of them.
You can. But then they're not linked. Oh, I guess.
So
Okay, that's
yeah,
fine.
I mean, it's not necessarily the case that you can seamlessly interoperate between the two. But the people who tend to do this are relatively large organizations that actually have existing relationships with multiple top CAs, and they've done integrations with multiple CAs because they don't, one of them goes, a CA can go belly up at any time with no notice.
Right. We've seen this too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So major companies are not willing to be
Put their eggs in
customers
one
of
basket and
only
just
one
go
CA.
to
So
multiples. Yeah, that makes sense.
there are large companies that are actually customers of like 5 of the 7 top CAs. So.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes sense.
So that's less that the ACME server is down and more that you want to have multiple backup certs for that server.
Yeah, well, right. Because if you can't get a cert, you're sort of in trouble, right? Oh. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Daniel.
Daniel Gunn Gilmore, can you, I like this a lot. I do think the working group should adopt it. Can you back up a couple slides? Maybe I'll say when. One more. Stop. Nope. Too far.
There's a lag.
There you go. Okay.
This is how we keep you off
Acme
awake,
client
by the way.
behavior. Stay awake. You're off. Please stay awake. Just trying to understand the diagram here. Step 2 says ca.example and step 3 says example.ca. Is this just a typo and I'm just confused?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. That clears that up. Secondly, it seems like in step 1 here, you have another place where a potentially unauthenticated DNS request can screw up an ACME scenario. So, right, like ACME is already a little bit vulnerable to DNS tampering between the CA, like when the CA does the queries. And here's a case where the client does an DNS query that can also screw up, right, and go issue something else out if their CAA records are poison. Do you have any thoughts about how to address this other than, well, just use DNSSEC and make sure you have a local DNSSEC resolving thing on your ACME
it's
client?
like you've read our security considerations. Yeah, have thought about this. So the obvious answer is use DNSSEC or DOE. The less obvious answer is I'm not completely clear on how bad. I mean, I guess it's bad, right? I guess if you can redirect to acme.evil and then acme.evil issues you a cert, now acme.evil has your private key for however long it takes you to figure that out.
But why do they have your private key?
They don't have your private key.
Your website would just be broken. That's all of it.
Right. Your web server will also have a cert from a non-public CA. So yeah, I'm probably need to think whether that's actually as bad as it looks. If you can.
I guess the question is you have to look at what you can do, what that CA can do to you.
I mean, maybe the additional thing is that when the client fetches the cert, it should just confirm that the cert seems valid to it.
Well, it should always do that, right? Theoretically.
Is it written down somewhere?
Sorry.
I'm just saying there's additional checks that you might want to make.
Me? Yeah. Yeah, it does sort of poke another pin at DNS, doesn't it? All right. So I'm not not sure what happened to the queue exactly, but I thought Samantha was in the queue before Amir. Or maybe I'm
still there.
yeah, but okay. I can kick you out. That's fun. Can I do that? Look.
Yeah, you can.
I know I'm not very good at this stuff. All right, Samantha.
Yeah, so there's two different things that were interesting here. It was there was an idea that was talked about here where it was like fallback CAs, and funny enough, actually from the client perspective, we do have clients like Caddy, which by default will attempt to get a certificate from Let's Encrypt, and then if that does not work for any reason, it falls back to 0 SSL. And if either fail to work for any reason, it will back off and then retry in that loop again. So if folks were wondering if that's something that has already been done, I think there was kind of a question about that. Some people do this in clients. And so it is a concept that people are familiar with. However, both of those are free CAs. The second one was this idea of looking up DNS from the client perspective as opposed to the CA perspective. And sure, if you're looking at DNS and you're checking CAA from your client, and let's go ahead and just say your DNS is poisoned somehow, you're going to make a request to another CA to issue a certificate who's also responsible for checking CAA. And they have specific timelines that they need to recheck CAA before the certificate is finalized and then issued. So I'm not sure it presents that much of a difficulty or that much of a problem. It could mess up your local configuration. It could lead to you not issuing in a timely manner. But I really do doubt that it could lead to misissuance unless the CA performing the issuance is not following the rules. So I'm not sure that's as big a problem. And then the other was the idea of like a DNS getting poisoned or BGP hijack or something like that. There were some researchers at, sorry, I'm looking at the chat there. Client is the cloud provider not the same as the user? Yes, that's very true. There was the idea of a BGP hijack or something like that leading to your DNS getting poisoned. Or your lookup getting poisoned, and some researchers at Princeton have looked at this and decided it's totally possible. In fact, the kind of interesting part here is you're doing your DNS lookup at the client side or at the hosting provider side. So they would have to hijack the DNS from their perspective, but then they would also have to hijack the DNS of the issuing CA somehow, which can be quite difficult. Even with multi-perspective validation, it's still possible, but the chance is slimmer. It's kind of, yeah, I'm not sure it's that big of an issue.
Thanks. I mean, the point here is we're just trying to bootstrap the Acme directory object down to the Acme bot. I posit that that's not a particularly security sensitive operation. And if it's wrong for all the DNS reasons, I'm not sure anything goes terribly wrong, but that's really the thing to look at here, I think.
So is this the first draft we're writing that's basically a client draft and not a server draft and not an extension draft? Aren't you briefing? It's a little different.
So Mike, do you want to talk about some things that came up on list?
Yeah, if I've still got minutes, I have a few more slides.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have
I wasn't actually planning to do these.
you're into our AOB at this point, so
yeah,
I'm fine with.
I put these in here for the online record, but yeah. So the terms of service had some really interesting debate around it. For good reason, the hosting providers do not want to be blindly accepting terms of service of like random arbitrary Acme servers on the internet. So that's one of the good reasons that we need to make sure that the account binding goes back to the human. It goes back to the subscriber, and the account binding is clearly tied to the subscriber, the Joe admin, because that solves his TOS problem. But I think this is subtle enough that I'm sure we need to look at this in more detail. The other interesting point that came up on list next, is can this be solved through the hoster UI? So if the hosting provider already has a menu for upload certificate files, that menu could have a box factory directory. Yeah, but we're really trying to get out of having to go beg and plead all the hosting providers to change their UI. That's really the main goal of having an auto discovery, is that we don't need to rely on hosting providers supporting all this through their UI. Hosting providers don't want to have to maintain a list of all the Acme servers on the internet. They don't want to be touching your account key. I think there's good reasons why we don't want to touch hosting provider UIs. And we want this totally automated. I think that's all I had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for matching the slide background color to the wall behind me. And so we have about -1 minute for any other business. And we'll obviously discuss on the list about adopting or doing an adoption call for that draft. So
And we'll also discuss on the list updated objectives.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because we didn't do that. We ran out of time, Roman. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So is there any other business before we let you all go to dinner?
They're leaving. We're done. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Yoav. Yeah, dang. Oof. Oh yeah. So let's go talk to him. I'm a little.